the Aborigines, and in New Zealand the Maoris. They say that this is the closest thing the white man has done to the way they believe. And so...
and it has a flat screen TV.
Yeah, yeah. And so we're now aiming our efforts at the quickest place we can do it, and not giving up on the other situations. Like I've had one. See, you can take all of these principles and they're new buildings, and we could build with an army of people, and we're getting an army of people basically. We could put an army of people together building these buildings all over the world, and we wouldn't scratch the surface of what the number of existing buildings are. So taking these principles and applying them in what is called retrofit to existing buildings is a serious issue. And it's not near as fun as going out in the boonies and starting from scratch and throwing up a carbon zero building. It's a lot more mental application to try to take an existing building and retrofit it. It's expensive as well, but we're doing it and attempting it. But what I'm getting at is we've got a project that's been on the books, on the drawing board and everything in Long Beach, California. Just a little $500,000 home that somebody bought and wants to add on to it and make it, retrofit it to be more toward carbon zero. They can't get it absolutely carbon zero. And they're coming up against things like it is in a historic zone, and we can't even put thermal windows in it, because you have to replace the windows with like kind of stuff, which is the old window weights and the old glass. I mean, it's like ridiculous. I mean, history is for history books, otherwise people are going to be history. And so it's like insane what's going on with retrofit. But retrofit is something like, it's something to have in your minds, because everybody can't build a new house. Some people are going to need to retrofit their existing house. And it's taking everything, all the principles are simply the same. It's the procedure and of applying them to an existing building. I was asked to go to Norway to teach a course, but at the same time, the School of Architecture in Norway, the Bergen School of Architecture, and they are not part of a university. They're just an architectural school. And they bought a 9-story concrete bunker grain silo that still smells of rotting corn and stuff. But the architecture students are in that building. It is, it's weatherproof, where it rains on it and it doesn't leak very much. But it's just concrete, 1-foot thick walls. And when I got there, it was in the winter, and the students are all in jumpsuits and hats and earmuffs and gloves, sitting at their drafting tables, doing architecture, freezing. And I pulled out my wool hat and gloves and everything just to be able to talk to them. And so they wanted me to help them figure out how to retrofit this building. And this really becomes a good approach to retrofit of cities. We had several discussions with all kinds of professors and designers and students and everything, and it was going to be super expensive to apply all of these principles to this building. But it was a 9-story building, and it did have a huge volume of space. And the concept, and that's the issue, is coming up with a concept first. The concept that we ended up with to retrofit this building was, it's such a massive thing that we determined that it was not a building. We called it terrain, just like cliffs and rock formations and whatever. So we called it terrain, and we quit trying to retrofit the building. We just went in and made little areas, like swallows build little mud nests on the overhangs of Super 8 motels and stuff like that. We would go in and apply all these principles to a little area. This little area is warm, has a little solar panel, has a little water catchment, has plants growing, and we just go in like a little cells of cancer almost, and overtake this building, and rather than trying to retrofit the whole building, we took our space and applied all these principles to it. And so anyway, that's just another approach on retrofit because we're trying the more or less conventional approach to this house in Long Beach, and it's like, it's been going on for almost a year, still don't have a permit. It's a shame, you know, that's the way it is. But so retrofit is going to be facing the same thing that that new buildings are. You're inhibited by the nature of the situation. Yeah.
Quick question. The last thing we saw on the slides of the toxicity of the tires. How does your whatever you put over the tires prevent the toxicity from coming into it?
Well, there's two answers to that question. There's another question that probably would come up, and I'll go ahead and bring it out, is burning of the tires too. But the tire, when you go to a tire store, and it's got the show window and the sun coming through the window, you walk in and you smell the rubber. You know, it's off-gassing, they call it. So a lot of people ask that question. And we've gotten a lot of bad press on the website and stuff about, you know, this is garbage. We went through a period of time where we had to determine every building as a waste dump. So get a permit for dumping waste. So just paperwork. But so a physicist from University of Wisconsin, on his own volition, did a big, thick study on running air through tires, old tires, new tires, water, and so on. And he ended up with the thought that, I think his last paragraph said that living in a tire building is about as dangerous as eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And so then I would get people that said, well, if that peanut butter and jelly sandwich is on white bread, then it's dangerous. But so you get your sticklers for sure. But the bottom line is he proved that what he came up with was that tires, after they got 20,000 miles on them, have done their off-gassing, and they're not off-gassing anymore. But then, too, they are buried. When you take a tire wall, and we pack out this, you'll probably be seeing or doing some of this today. You pack out with cans and mud and cement, and then you build that out to where it's tangent with the rest of the tire, and then you plaster that. So your minimum is about 1.5 to 2 inches of plaster over one place, but that grows to 3, 4, 5, 8, 10. So you basically are burying the tire. That's a tire wall. It's buried. Even if it was off-gassing, it's sealed. But they don't off-gas after they're old, and they're buried. So that is a non-issue, but we still get people worried about that. I mean, we have in the back of the Phoenix, when you go there, the tires are exposed. I mean, I don't think you'll smell anything back there. Then the other question that comes up a lot on tires is burning. Everybody's heard about the tire piles around the world spontaneously combusting, which they do. But that's because, if you take a crumpled up piece of newspaper with air all around it and everything, and you torch it with a cigarette lighter, it just goes up in flames. That's the way a tire pile is, with all the tires with air all around them. They can spontaneously combust, and it's hard to put them out. But if you take paper, which is very combustible, in a New York City phone book and put a cigarette lighter to it, it doesn't go off. It doesn't happen. That's the way a tire pounded with earth is. And that was my line, at least, that when people asked that question, that's what I told them. Well, that came true because an EarthShip up here in the mountains went through one of the major forest fires we've had in the last few years. And I've got pictures of it. The front face wood burnt off, the glass disintegrated, the roof disintegrated, everything went away except the tire walls. They were plastered, and a couple of places, it wasn't a finished building. A couple of places the tires weren't plastered over, and that part, the rubber melted down to the steel belted stuff. But wherever there was plaster on the tires, the tire wall, they're actually going to build the building back on the same tire walls. So they don't burn.
One of your books as well, right?
Yeah, I think so. They don't burn, and as used as a wall, and they don't off-gas, and they are indigenous to the entire planet, and you can make super walls out of them. And so that's the general look at the basics. I think we could take a 10-minute break and let everybody walk around, and we'll get back into some system stuff. All right. Well, I'm going to take a few questions, and people have been asking me questions, so I'm asking them to ask them again in front of everybody so that everybody gets the answer. But we're talking here briefly about the permitting in New Mexico, for instance. In New Mexico is where we developed this, so in New Mexico you pretty much can get a permit as quick as any other building. In Colorado, some counties don't even require a permit. Some counties are harder, and some are like New Mexico. I have an architect's license still in Colorado. They haven't taken it yet, so that helps sometimes. But we had people. This is again many stories like this. We had people that were in one county in Colorado where the plan checker was new. She was engineer educated, and she just made it really difficult for these people. And they had been working for 2.5 years to get a permit, and finally they couldn't wait any longer. And they went ahead and got a permit they just decided to buy a manufactured home that they bring in and set on concrete blocks, and that they could live in while they continued to fight for their permit for the EarthShip. And they did it, and they went in. The only stumbling block on their permit for the manufactured home was they had to sign an affidavit that said they would not let any infants or elderly people go in the building for 6 months because of the off-gassing of all the weird materials in it. But they got the permit. They got the permit in a couple of weeks, where they'd been working on trying to get a permit for a carbon zero home for 2.5 years. They ended up finally getting the permit, building the building, and getting a divorce. Somebody, you had a question.
Your company, do they do the package plans like Shell and Power for people? And
yeah, we go all over the world, and we do turnkey or what we call shell and systems. And there's a packaged plan book, but now when it's just simply out of date, because when people choose something out of the packaged plan book, we try to move them into the new global application of that, which we don't have put into a packaged plan book yet, but it's still similar. And so a lot of people get us to do what we call shell and systems, and that's the structure and the power, water, sewage systems installed. And sometimes no doors, no floors, no ceilings. We define what you want us to leave out, and it keeps the price, cuts the price by 30, 35, even 40%. These buildings are labor intensive, so we keep these pies going. Usually it's like ballpark, it's like something like 35% materials, 35% labor, and then, 70? And then you got subcontractors like your excavator, your electrician, and your plumber. They end up being in the neighborhood of 15%, and subs. And then the rest of it is systems. If you're hiring a contractor like us to do it, there's profit, and then there's systems. But the thing to consider is that labor and materials are pretty close to the same. So if you're going to build the house, and they're in the neighborhood of 35%. So if you're going to build the building yourself or seriously participate in it, there's where you can cut. You can't really cut on materials. They cost what they cost. You can't cut on systems. They cost what they cost. If you know some subcontractors, maybe you can get a break. But if you're building or contracting the building yourself, you can cut profit out and greatly reduce labor to the point where you can cut, 35% out of the building. Now then, if you do that and do shell-in systems, you can, you know, the $205 a square foot that I say these cost can probably be cut in half depending on your approach. I say $205 a square foot because some people, it just shows you what these cost if you absolutely outright buy it. I've had these seminars going on for, I don't know, 15 years probably or more, and in the first book I said beavers and wasps can build their own homes and people can't, and I made a big thing of that. Well, I had my head up my ass on that one because some people should not build their own house. I mean, I had two, in one seminar I had these two couples and they looked very much the same. I couldn't even, you know, I got them mixed up. The guy was tall and skinny. They were, you know, they were elderly, 50-ish maybe, or late 40s or something. My heart bleeds for them. But the guy was tall and thin. The woman was short and heavy. Two couples almost looked identical. One of them, they both got all inspired and bought land around house and started building their EarthShip. And they both, I always advise people, if you're going to do it yourself, start off with just one module. This was back in the days when we did use more than these packaged and the global designs. So I talked them both into just doing one U first to see how it went. And one couple did a U, was successful, did another one, did another one, did another one. I think they even did another one. They got a giant building full of food and everything. The other couple got one U not even done and got a divorce and hated me. You know, so these people couldn't even operate a shovel, whereas these people could, and they looked just the same. So you never can tell. But what I'm saying is, some people should, you know, some people should do it, but when you make a blanket statement like beavers and wasps, you know, you're just shallow thinking, I guess.
So the 205 is basically if pardon? Per square foot. Yeah, but I mean that's turnkey to say have you build it all the way out through finish.
Yeah, that's basically what it costs, and when we've done it all over the world, and that is a figure that is, you know, in the U.S., you know, you can get what do you call it, the same kind of home that Habitat for Humanity builds for probably $150 a square foot. You know, you can get a junky little frame home for less, but the price of a good, you know, brick veneered, well insulated thermal home that's not really a carbon zero home but just a good home is in that ballpark all over the U.S. And like I say, in Santa Fe they're even a lot more.
So you're not saving money on utilities and everything.
Right, and that's a point. Like say you take say they cost the same. Say you compare it, and an EarthShip costs $205 a square foot, which maybe equates to, say it costs $300,000 to get the size of a home you want, and it costs the same to get a conventional home, and then your mortgage payment on $300,000, if you're lucky, could be you know, a couple of grand a month maybe, and it would be the same here. Then on the conventional home, you'd have to add between $500 and $1,000 a month on utilities to your living expenses, which would make them in the neighborhood of $3,000 a month. Whereas the EarthShip, these buildings like the corner cottage, the only thing they use is cooking. And if I were living there, I would be cooking with a solar oven, and I'd rather even use a microwave that runs off of the solar power system than a propane oven. So, but in the worst scenario, I'm saying, the utility bill on one of these homes in this community that we're doing all over the world is $100 a year.
And that's for gas.
$100 a year for your utility bill. So that's not bad. That's not even worth putting in here. Whereas your $500 to $1,000 a month does affect your living expenses. So that's the overall living expenses of a carbon zero home can actually be less. Does somebody else have a question on?
Well, there was one question you wanted to have come back, which was the structural
Oh.
integrity of a can only or a bottle only
Oh, and somebody had a bearing strength question too. So on the can walls, which you will probably be doing some of here in a little bit, cans, bottles, it's not near as fun as going out in the boonies and starting from scratch and throwing up a carbon zero building. It's a lot more mental application to try to take a existing building and retrofit it. It's expensive as well, but we're doing it and attempting it. But what I'm getting at is we've got a project that's been on the books, on the drawing board and everything in Long Beach, California. It's just a little, it's like ridiculous. I mean, history is for history books, otherwise people are going to be history. And so it's like insane what's going on with retrofit. But retrofit is something like, it's something to have in your minds because everybody can't build a new house. Some people are going to need to retrofit their existing house, and it's taking everything, all the principles are simply the same. It's the procedure and of applying them to an existing building. A $500,000 home that somebody bought and wants to add on to it and make it, retrofit it to be more toward carbon zero. They can't get it absolutely carbon zero. And they're coming up against things like it is in a historic zone, and we can't even put thermal windows in it because you have to replace the windows with like kind of stuff, which is the old window weights and the old glass. You can take all of these principles and they're new buildings, and we could build with an army of people, and we're getting an army of people basically. We could put an army of people together building these buildings all over the world, and we wouldn't scratch the surface of what the number of existing buildings are. So taking these principles and applying them in what is called retrofit to existing buildings is a serious issue. And the Aborigines, and in New Zealand the Maoris, they say that this is the closest thing the white man has done to the way they believe. And
And it has a flat screen TV.
yeah. And so we're now aiming our efforts at the quickest place we can do it and not giving up on the other situations. Like I've had one, there's